Scott Johnson, fellow classmate, Jamestown High School.
Yeah, what a class.
Yeah, what a class. The greatest, obviously.
Yeah, greatest generation. Well, not quite. All the ones before us.
Now, your family's been in Jamestown area for a long time, haven't they?
Oh yeah, it goes right back to the early 1900s. I never heard the story of how they immigrated here from Sweden, but both sides of the family immigrated from Sweden or Norway.
So what was your mom's maiden name?
Swanson.
So we have a Swanson and a Johnson, and
Yeah.
just like I was a Carlson and a Peterson.
Yeah.
That's the way it was.
Right.
Exactly. And, you, during your growing up, sports became part of your world, right?
Right. It was a wonderful time to grow up.
Yeah.
And that it was the boom. I call it the boom years. If you were a kid in a middle class family in Jamestown, you had all kinds of opportunities for recreation and being taken care of by parents, and just saw the world in a really good way. It gets tougher as you get older. After you graduate from high school, and you got to decide what I'm going to do, and it's a rough time. The Vietnam War and the cultural revolution, really played on me, and I think I changed paths, and sometimes I wish I hadn't. I was going to be a gym teacher like Kenny Johnson and Neoma Berg and all my aunts and uncles and cousins, and I said, you can't do that at that time. That isn't a worthy position. The way the world's trying to get better, and it's revolting, and you have to have a higher significance. So I just went to Fredonia and took political science and tried to stay out of the Vietnam War, and it didn't work out.
So you grew up on the north side, didn't you?
First, the east side, down in Faulkner and Cowling Street, down by Dahlstrom's.
Mm-hmm.
And in fifth grade, we moved to the end of Stowe Street. Parents finally bought a house instead of renting, and they really put a lot into the house and the garden. Me and my brother and sister constantly had to work on the garden. The people that we bought the house from had an extra lot of just all beautiful flowers and fruit trees, and we worked and worked and worked. And
so what did your dad do for a living?
he sold for Sunshine Biscuit Company,
Okay.
Nabisco and Keebler's competitor, which was very big at the time. And he took orders in supermarkets and stores, and their truck delivered them, and he put them up. He'd take me down to Gold Star grocery store and go in there and have this 10-foot section of 6 shelves of his product. And you go in there and the section would be empty. They were so popular and the store was so busy. So that's quite a bit of sales, to see a whole empty section, 10 feet, 6 shelves up. Yeah. But
and your mother was a house mother? Or
she was a waitress like the women in her side of the family. She worked at 210 Pine. She was on the second floor, the floor where they had to memorize the orders of the 40 orders memorized in her head, and maybe that's why I had such a good memory for this book of all the things that happened. I mean, a million things happened, as you can see in the book.
Well, for those that are watching this on film, 210 Pine was famous for its waitresses remembering and taking no notes.
Yeah.
It was remarkable. And no mistakes. That was the amazing thing.
Yeah.
As well. So it was the three of you growing up, and was there sports you gravitated towards, Scott?
Well, we had my father's brother, Kenny, would come back in the early 60s, late 50s, to run the city tennis program. And he came back to be familiarized. His parents were still alive down on Hopkins Avenue, where they had built a tennis court when they were kids. But he taught at colleges all over the country and was the tennis coach. I think sometimes the soccer coach, lacrosse coach, swimming coach. But he was all athletics. Matter of fact, he had a doctorate of athletics, which are kind of rare, you know. But he took us to his tennis program. I think on Mondays we went to Washington Junior High School, on Tuesdays to Allen Park, on Wednesday to Roseland Park, Thursdays to Lincoln, and Fridays we kind of had off. But he taught us everything about tennis, and he was like our idol, you know, the guy that had attention from, and you know, it was really something, you know. And we had other relatives that played a lot of tennis. My aunt Neoma Berg, I think they said she won the women's title at the age of 13, and kept it into her late 40s, you know, other than a few beatings, but she was quite a tennis player. She's in the Chautauqua County Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and her husband was Dave Berg.
Dave Berg was a real intense person, and it was kind of funny that in his 60s he took golf up, and he started playing with us at South Hills Country Club and became one of the boys, and we never saw him as that. He was always a little bit too good for us kids or something. He always had his mind on something, but he became really good friends with me. I guess he saw me as a golfer, a good golfer, and taking the game up at 60 and breaking 80 a few times, I thought was remarkable. But that's the way he attacked everything. He was a very brilliant person, you know.
Well, a very good tennis player. And,
yeah.
He was always, to my mind, because I lived in Allen Park, you'd go up and watch those tournaments, certainly the Western New York tournaments, Dave Berg, or the city tournaments. It was usually Len Johnson.
Right.
He was primo. And then there was Dave Berg right below him.
Right.
I mean, there was always Len and Dave.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of young guys. And Turnell and others like that.
You know, it's kind of funny that Len Johnson was one of my aunt and my father and my uncle's best friend in growing up, and he helped to build their clay tennis court next to their house, in all places on Hopkins Avenue, amongst all the factories.
Really?
Yeah, and so they built their own clay tennis court. They were so into it.
Well, didn't the Bergs have Naomi and Dave had their own court, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like Kindtone area?
Right, and that a real old house that the Berg family, I think, had. I still remember the stairway there. What do you call it? An old big stairway, but it was something else to go to the second floor. It was like from a movie of Gone with the Wind or something like that. That whole house, it had, 20-foot ceilings or something like that.
So tennis, I know even you and I played a few times.
Right.
And then what was the natural attraction to golf?
Oh, my Uncle Kenny said one day after a couple of years of these tennis programs, he says, I'm going to teach you, Scotty, how to play golf, and we're going to go get some clubs and go down to Jamestown Municipal, right down the hill, 8 blocks from where I lived, and a perfect place to learn the game because the greens fees were so cheap. And I still remember going around to all the golf courses in the area to get me a set. He wasn't going to go buy me a set somewhere, but it was the most mongrel golf set of all time. I know we got a 5-iron at Maplehurst Country Club that had been around since the 1800s, I think, and went up to Chautauqua and got a 7-iron, and up to Moonbrook and got a driver, and my uncle donated a putter, and they were just not matching in any way, and it was interesting. But
for me, you paint a great picture in the book of the municipal course.
Yeah.
Could you do that for the film?
Yeah, municipal course was built in 1956 by the city of Jamestown after 20 years of, close to 20 years of planning for it. And they had 50 acres and built a 9-hole golf course for $10,000. And Rotary and some other clubs put in the other 10,000. So it was a $20,000 golf course that was really pretty good golf course. It was a par 36. Part of the course, the clubhouse started out down by Faulkner Street on the level, but Anna Svensson, the Danish lady that had the thick accent, was kind of the runner of the course, the proprietor. But they said they were tired of so many kids sneaking on the golf course that they moved the clubhouse up onto Curtis Street, which overlooked the course, so she could see everybody sneaking on. And then that overlooked the stadium, where Dick Cole, the legend of legends to us, would hit golf balls for us down into the stadium if we found enough at night. But hundreds and hundreds of kids went down there to play because it was like a $7 a year membership, which my Uncle Kenny sent us every Christmas for our Christmas present, was the membership. And you could play Monday through Friday. And we had no supervision, which I think was unbelievable compared to what kids go through today, that people want them watched. But what a ball to just learn the game with that. One funny aspect about that is...
Describe the 9 holes, because my vision of it was built on a hill.
Yeah. Yeah, the hill part of it was three or four holes. And then there were 6 holes down on the plains by the creek that went all the way over to the street along Jamestown Community College. I forgot where the Gator Club was. But on a 95-degree summer day, and you got to the gate, to that corner of the course, and you didn't have any liquid with you, you almost died. And I put a story in the book about finding the back door of the Gator Club open in our thirst, and found some Wink soda in the refrigerator, and don't leave the back door open of the Gator Club because thirsty kids are going to find it. But we played every day. We played 63 holes. We played even more holes than that, and didn't know the rules, didn't play by the rules. Just kept hitting balls till you got better and better and better. Kenny gave us a little bit of instruction, of how to hold the club with a Varden grip and to keep your left arm straight. And there was a big sign at the first tee, municipal, that says, "Keep your shirt on." And we said, is that like physically keeping our shirt on or keeping our temper down? But me and my brother both had just terrible tempers. And I think a lot of it had to do with this Uncle Kenny, that after he left the area for the summers for good, he'd come back and see how we were doing in golf. And we were always out to impress him. And we always got mad when he came back, and he would just say, "Oh, Scotty, oh, Scotty." But got kind of mad, and I think that carried over for many, many years later for trying to get better and compete, and missing one of those short putts that kind of defy golfers and terrorize them, the 3-foot putt.
Oh my gosh. And so were there role models, Scott, down there at the municipal course?
Absolutely. Dick Cole was about 5 years older than us, and he was a tall guy that just pulverized the ball to us. And we would, after we playing 63 holes, you'd run out of balls because you'd hit them in the creek, you'd hit them in the woods. And we'd go out and follow the leagues around that started, I think, at 4:30, and see where they lost their balls. And if you had a really good night, you'd go to the top of the Curtis Street where the clubhouse is, and Dick worked there as a part-time attendant. And we'd beg him to tee up some balls and hit them towards the stadium. And we'd just stand there with our mouth open as he pulverized those balls all the way down to the first base side or into the bleachers on the right sideline. I found out later in interviews with Dick Cole that the superintendent of the stadium kind of got tired of his mowers being clogged up by golf balls, and he went up and asked who was hitting these balls. And I don't think Dick said anything, but
Yeah.
but there was older people too. I remember the first hole, the out of bounds was like 2 feet from the tee, going down Curtis Street downhill to the left, and I'd always hit it down into the road, and the ball would go bouncing down the road, and it always would stop on Marshall Hedstrom's lawn, who he took real good pride in his lawn, and you had to run in there and sneak into his flower beds and get your ball and run out while he was screaming at you. The funny thing about Marshall Hedstrom was later on in life, he took up the game, golf, and I was really impressed with that after being the yard protector of the golf trespassers.
When you were growing up, does I remember a shack? I remember they could buy food there. Maybe
Yeah.
some stuff.
Yeah, Stewart sandwiches. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a little clubhouse. Just a little place, and no like a bar or anything. It was just a small trailer-like building.
Who kept us? So the city owned it, and that means the Parks Department. Were there certain Parks employees who were assigned to that?
Yeah, I think Wally Carlson was the supervisor,
Okay.
and David Vanzik, Gene Johnson, and there was a couple others. And Anna Svensson was the little Danish lady with the thick accent that ran a tight ship, and we always wanted to keep her happy. And Russ Dietrich had a lot to do with running it uptown. But I mean, what an opportunity when you compare today. For $7 a year, you went down there and played 63 holes a day and had a ball. And
they would have city tournaments. I mean, the championships.
Oh, yeah. I played in the Jamestown Youth Open, they called it, a few times, and I was terrible. I didn't do anything. I think when I got into my high school years, I could hit a pretty good drive. But I remember the one tournament I played in, there was a lot of interest over at the scorer's table because a young girl had placed high in one of the flights, and that turned out to be Sue Ellen Northrup. Yeah. And I was really impressed. I mean, here's this pretty young, cute girl that was beating the boys. And at that time, golf for girls was practically a no-no. I mean, they didn't have college, high school teams or college teams, and it was impressive to me. Who became a very good golfer and a teacher.
Yeah, and Sue Ellen lived on this, not too far from where I lived.
Yeah.
And she was an extraordinary athlete and sort of like, and she was very attractive and almost an anomaly in the sense that how could anybody be that good?
Yeah.
And a girl, like
right.
Wow. And she was it. So then Jamestown, then you kind of gravitate away from there, don't you?
Yeah, 1969, because of Jamestown Community College expanding, the course was closed. And that was a sad day.
Yeah, I forgot.
Actually, before the course was closed, the holes were shortened all the time. For a new building going up at JCC, the hole was made from a par 4 to a par 3 or a par 5 to a par 4. And it went from 72 par for two times around the 9-hole course to 70 and then to 68 in the end. And yeah, I don't know. I blame JCC for ending that course, but you really can't do that. I mean, JCC has meant a lot to so many people, even to myself. I went there for 2 years, and but the city had planned a new course at Chattacoin Park when they closed it, and they put some money aside. And after they started, they ran into all kinds of problems. I've heard money problems. I've heard the city dump pollution. I found out just recently that the unstable ground is even more important than all those, because I wanted to build a small course for youth in the area with the Joe Biden money, the $28 million that was with the city. I went to a few planning sessions and put my word in, but it didn't get anywhere. And I think someday it might.
Yeah, I think that was the location of the city dump.
Yeah.
And then they gravelled it all in and put grass on it, but it's not stable at all. I remember
No.
At best it was a soccer field.
Yeah, and I heard the soccer post would go up and down.
My kids played it. It was a mushy mess.
Yeah.
So then I was curious, Scott, because I remember, because you were class of '69, and we had a very good golf team with Dick Kimball, I think was the coach, wasn't he?
Yeah, Dick Kimball, a fantastic team with lots of people going out for the team. There was at least 8 good golfers on that team. I went out for it one time in my home course, Municipal, was where the tryout was, and I didn't do well, and I wasn't that disappointed when you see the names of Roger Loop and Dan O'Neill and Chuck Antonuccio and Rhodes, Dave Young. It just went on and on and on. These guys were very good players, brought up at country clubs, and I didn't take it too serious. I had a real interest in basketball at that time too.
Well, let's pause for just a second on basketball, because you do tell a very good story here, and not only your career, which was abbreviated, but how you ended it.
Yeah, it's there's some real names dropped in my book. I mean, you got everything from Bucky Phillips to Richard Nixon to Dean Smith, which the story was about with the basketball. I'd worked hard to get on the Jamestown High School team. I think right through junior high, I was never a starter, always a bench warmer. I played a lot at the Y and was a fairly good YMCA style player that in organized sports never played much, never learned much. But I got on in the senior year. I was on the team, and I was like the 11th man. There was a couple of juniors that I was probably better than, but he needed to play those players because it was all seniors on that team. Very good team that won the section. And I had the number 1 player in New York State on the team, Don Johnston, 6'9", heavily recruited by North Carolina. Well, one night, Dean Smith, the head coach of North Carolina, made one of his trips to Jamestown to watch us play Dunkirk High School. And we were setting according to the Post-Journal, we were setting a new record for the amount of points ahead of the other team. We were up like 35 points in the third or fourth quarter. And me and the 12th man kept looking down the bench to see when he was going to put us in. And finally, with 11 seconds left, he came down the bench and said, do you guys want to get in? And about that time, my head was ready to blow off. I took it as an embarrassment and just something that shouldn't have happened. I don't know where Dean Smith drew into that he thought we'd embarrass him or something. But after the game, I went into the locker room and got my jersey and blazer, and Dean Smith and our coach were standing by the door, and I just went over and threw it in his face and said, "See you later." I was done. And so Dean Smith saw something he probably never saw before, a disgruntled player losing his temper, and I never did regret it. But 2 years later, I was playing a pickup game at Jamestown Community College, and I noticed a guy was watching me on the sideline, and I came off the court. I was playing well. I kept developing and gaining weight and strength, and this guy stuck out his hand. He says, "I'm Nick Criolla, the new coach at JCC, and I want you on my team." So that was something.
Well, those are kind of go-go years. Nick had quite the teams. I don't know if that was the team.
That was the worst team.
That was the worst. Okay.
Nick was appointed, without like a month's notice to be the JCC coach, and he after that he started recruiting some of the better local players and Buffalo players, and then he started recruiting nationally, and had a network set up that he brought in.
New York City.
Washington, Baltimore, he got unbelievable players, and he packed that gym. And but I thank him for a lot.
Oh, that's such a great story. For me, reading the book, because we're obviously similar ages, and the names you put in the book brought me down memory lane on so many parts. And then, so as you kind of worked your way through school and JCC and a basketball time period, still playing golf, but where were you playing golf?
I went out for the JCC team because they needed players. It wasn't the same situation as the high school where there was a million players. JCC had trouble recruiting golfers that year. And there was Roger Loop and Steve Albin from Bemis, who are very, very good players. But they had trouble getting five or six players to go to a match. And I still remember it was my last round at Municipal for a tryout with George Batitis, the famous George Batitis, who was the athletic director, basketball coach before Criolla, and the golf coach. And I went out and tried out, and it was the only time I ever broke par at Municipal Golf Course, and I shot like a 32. And the only thing I could attribute it to was the gentle way of George Batitis. That sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I played for a year and a half for JCC on the golf team. Never broke 80. Was always trying to get better, but had a good experience. And about a year after I left JCC, George Batitis asked me. He said he was going on sabbatical for 2 years and asked me to be the golf coach. And I said, "Oh, why not?" Plus the money was unbelievable. It was $200 a semester I got paid. So there were some real strange experiences I put in the book. Some of them are a little, off color. I had on my team the second year 2 or 3 guys that had just gotten out of Vietnam. And here I am, this skinny 21-year-old kid that is supposed to be the disciplinary coach of these people. And you really couldn't discipline them. They like to drink beer or smoke marijuana. And I didn't know a lot of it was going on, but it was going on. But what are you going to tell a guy who just got out of Vietnam to shape up and ship out? But the second year we had some really good players and won the sub-regional. Then we got blasted in the regional. Found out a guy was drinking on the bus all the way to Albany from Jamestown, and I think that was something to not be very well for the next day for the whole team. But it was quite an experience. I don't think JCC wants me back as golf coach because we had some experiences. George was getting letters about a team that was supposedly pulling joints out of golf bags and beers and
So if we look at your resume at JCC, that's what that'll show.
Yeah, and I waited for weeks after I left if I'd get a call from Wake Forest or UCLA or Alabama. They needed a golf coach, and never got a call.
Son of a gun, If you hadn't changed your phone number, you would have been a different track.
That's right.
So during that time, where was JCC? Were they playing Moonbrook?
Yeah, the home field was at Moonbrook because of conditions. I think we went to Bemis Point Golf Course. I talk about Bemis in the book a lot. To us at that time, it was the 8th wonder of the world because it was built on, I've heard 1,000 feet of gravel. That everywhere else in this terrible area of clay-based soil in the spring, they were as dry as a bone. And
Bemis Point is amazing. To this day, it's still amazing.
Yeah.
But your career continues in golf. I mean, you continue to involve yourself and with other courses as well.
Yeah, and then I quit playing for a few years after I went to Maplehurst when JCC closed the course at Municipal, and I had a great time at Maplehurst. It was inexpensive. I could afford it, and a lot of my friends were members there. And we had a weekend game every Saturday, Sunday at 7 o'clock 7:30. Dick Kimball played, Roger Loop, Dick Cole, George Batitis was the leader, the social leader, and it was a lot of fun.
And they had a dining room there. Did Wally Holmes own it then?
Yeah, he was just, I think a year or two before he just bought it.
What was he like?
Controversial to members. The board had trouble with him, they say, and I heard later years that they overblew it, that he wouldn't put water out on the course during the member guests because he wanted his bar business. It wasn't true. To me, he was the nicest guy in the world.
He was quite a golfer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a good golfer. He taught. He gave me a few lessons. My putting was so bad, I think even he gave up when he saw my cut putting stroke. But he was always nice to me. In later years, whenever I saw him, he'd always come over with a big smile on his face, and was quite a guy.
No, and it clearly was. And what I remember about Maplehurst, the few times I golfed there, they had a swimming pool,
right,
and a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
In fact, that was kind of a go-to place for restaurants.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Their cheeseburgers are unbelievable. I think it was like aged ground beef, to tell you the truth, but it really made them taste good, and it was unforgettable.
And at Maplehurst, some of the people that were of note. What do you remember about them?
Oh, there was a foursome that played every morning. It had Ford Hagberg, the bank president, Lenny Lisandro, a factory worker, Cappy Caprino, a liquor salesman, and Jerry Wayne, a school principal. So that was what golf was at Maplehurst, just a real mixture of a melting pot, and you never felt like you didn't make enough money there, or you didn't have the country club kind of thing. Anybody was welcome there. If they were any women, races, everybody was welcome there, and it was like a melting pot, and you didn't have to dress a certain way or anything like that. Golf decades before that had a bad reputation, I think, for being so elitist and separatist, and that's the way it is. But golf in those years was really starting to boom. The Arnie Palmer thing, Arnie's Army, drew in a lot of people, and I think the lower classes started playing golf, and a lot of golf courses around here.
Well, it's funny. Cappy Caprino, just an aside, was a professional wrestling referee.
Yeah.
And so I remember seeing him. Buffalo. He'd be. And tonight's referee is Cappy Caprino.
Right.
And he was a Jamestown guy, the liquor salesman.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember what. You remember Ford Hagberg with the barrel voice, the hoarse voice, screaming mother of pearl everywhere he went on that golf course, and drinking heavily. I think he drank a half a quart of scotch every time he played. But the funniest name of a nickname for sports that I ever heard of, him and his partner Lenny Lisandro were known as Meathead and Hamburger Helper. I mean, can you beat that as a name?
Well, that is good. I hadn't heard that. So you were at Maplehurst quite a bit, and then were you playing other courses at the time?
I tried to play in a few tournaments. I played in the Buffalo District one year. Thought I was a good golfer. I was like 6'7" handicap probably at Maplehurst, and a guy at Springville in my first match in the Buffalo District just blew me out of the water, and I was really surprised because at that time you didn't pull a cart. A good golfer didn't pull a cart around. He was pulling a cart. He dressed kind of funny, and he just destroyed me. And it was an awakening that you got to be really good to win anything in golf.
Not only that, I mean, you played on a couple of course, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time for you to tell some unique stories. I know, let's talk about the putter story.
Well, after Maplehurst, I took a couple of years off, and I heard about this course on the Bust-Ice-Stillwater Road that had a game that you divided up teams and played for a little bit of money and skins, and they called it the skin game. And I said, well, man, that'll keep me interested. I didn't. All my friends had left Maplehurst. They'd gone to other courses, and I started playing there, and gradually started improving, unbelievably improving, that I became the top captain at South Hills after 3 or 4 years. And I think my handicap dropped from like 9 to 1 year it was 0 when I was in my 40s. But one night we're in a Wednesday night skin game, and I had Rich Perry, Joe Papalardo, and Pete. I don't know what Pete's last name is. I'll think of it before this ends. But we got over to the 9th hole, par 3, and there's a big pond in front of the tee. And it's not very far from the tee, the pond is. And there's a terrible tradition in the skin game that the worst player tees off first, and then the third man, they call him, and then the 2-man, and then the captain, me, gets up. Well, after these guys had all hit, I teed my ball up, and I started to take the club back, and I felt a disturbance to my left. And I looked, I dropped the club, it was so disturbing, but I looked a few feet out into the pond, and there was an arm coming out of the water. This is a true story. The water's here, and the arm is holding a putter. What we didn't know was Tom Trusso had hired skin divers to go in there to search for balls. But I mean, our balls are like this, but I go over to the edge of the pond a few yards away, and I look and I say, that's my putter. It was my putter that I threw in the pond from the adjacent 8th green about 50 yards away many years before that, and one of my rages for another short putt that cost us money. And addicted. I don't know if you know about golfers, but they're addicted. Not everyone, but people. They're always looking for a way to get better, a seeker or a cure. And my mind started racing and saying, this is God. This is God bringing this putter back to me, and it's going to work this time. It's going to behave. I mean, how else could this 10 million to 1 occurrence when I'm on the tee happen? So finally, the skin diver comes out of the pond, and he swims over to the side, and I go over and said, sir, that's my putter. Can I have it? And he looked up at me, and he starts swearing and saying, I keep everything I find. And then I started begging. I says, sir, that really is my putter. And can I please have it? And he throws it at me and says, here. Well, I could hear the water sloshing in the putter shaft. And I played with it the rest of the 9, and I think the first putt I attempted with it was a 5-foot putt, and it went in. And I said, I looked up and said, thank you, God. I mean, but as things go, probably a couple weeks later, I'd had it, and I think I threw that putter in the woods so far that Indiana Jones couldn't find it. And I said, you could send that to Golf Digest, I suppose, but I never did. I waited to put it in writing, and you can believe it or not, all 3 witnesses have passed on, but the last living one, I had him sign a statement of what happened that night.
Well, here, just hold this up just for the camera, because that's the front page of that.
Yeah.
And let me just get that right there. You can't make this stuff up. That is front page of Hey Boomer, Golf Really Is That Story. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Gary Peter Sr. Drew that picture.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, then you had a chance, I'm going to just drop names here a little bit, with President Clinton. That's the Chautauqua Institution. In 1996.
96.
Yeah, he was doing, I'll give you a little background. He was doing a preparation for the debate against Bob Dole, and he chose Chautauqua, and he came here with the entire White House staff, and when he had some time off, he wanted to play Chautauqua.
Yeah, early October 1996. I heard a rumor that he was here and he wanted to play golf. And I went into the course. Chautauqua Institution is closed down now after the season. Golf is not going on that much at Chautauqua, but I went into the pro shop, and Troy, the assistant pro, I asked him, he says, yeah, he's going to be here Friday and be here at 1 by the first tee of the hill course. And not many people knew it. So I got there, and there was probably 50, 60 people maybe at the most. And he warmed up on a few shots, and then somebody came in, the press secretary got up on the tee and says, please stay away from Mr. Clinton. We're on a tight time schedule. We got to get going with this golf tournament. Then he looked over and saw Clinton shaking somebody's hand. So he kind of started swearing and says, okay, everybody line up in a long line of guys. And he came down and looks you right in the eye and gives you a really good handshake. Well, after that, I went off to the practice green. And Stan Lundeen, the assistant governor of New York, was there. He was going to play that day with Mr. Clinton. And I started hitting practice putts. Well, it must have looked awful odd to the Secret Service to see one guy away from the crowd over that way. And so he came over with some metal detector shields, and he wanted me. But then he looked down and he saw in my pockets a bulge. And he got down on his knees and grabbed that bulge, and he looked up at me. It was 3 golf balls, and he looked up at me and said something a little off color. And I was really shocked that our U.S. Secret Service, there's a Secret Service agent out there somewhere that would vouch to this, but I thought it was pretty funny. And he saw that it was golf balls, and he let me go on. But
you thought you were a force of nature, man.
Yeah. But the next, they said, that's it. The president's just going to play the hill course, because it was a secluded area that they could shut off pretty easy. That, and they'd been checking all week for snipers or people that were wandering around the course. I saw the Secret Service out in the woods with a guy with a big case. I don't know what was in that case, but I think it was a big gun, previously that week. But the next day, he insisted on playing the lake course. And, what a job for the Secret Service, because here, this course is wide open. There's 1 million people on the course that day because it's an unbelievable October day of like 70 degrees. And Mr. Clinton, we were on the 10th tee with Doc Englert and Dale West. And Bill Clinton was on the first tee with Stan Marshas, and they were going to play 18. And Mr. Clinton hit about 4 mulligans. And one of them went out into the middle of our fairway. And I looked at Dale West and said, let's get down there to pick this up. What a souvenir. Well, we ran down there. We didn't have a golf cart, but just before we got to the ball, a cart pulls up, and a guy reaches over and picks up the ball. He was the press secretary that made the scene the day before, and he looks at us and says, just trying to save the country some money, and pick the ball up.
So that was an amazing thing. We talk about a visit of a sitting president of the United States.
And later on, his 3-ring circus 10 golf carts were on the 13th hole when we were on the adjacent 17th hole. And what a scene! There's the doctor and the box with the nuclear codes in it, and on and on and on. Secret Service people running ahead to check under bridges, and it was really something to see that. But I don't know, if I ever get this book published, I'll send Bill Clinton a copy.
Well, he lives in Long Island, so I think he'd be delighted to have it.
Yeah.
But that's not your. I mean, you can drop other names. I mean, Bucky Phillips.
Yeah.
I mean, Bucky Phillips. It has nothing to do with golf.
No, my friend George Batitis, I interviewed George Batitis' daughter about the book after he passed, and I said, do you have any other stories? Because she told me a lot of good George Batitis stories of him wrestling at Ithaca, and but she says, yeah, here's another story. My mother got a phone call one day from George. He says, I'm down at Cable Hollow Golf Course, and I won't be home for a while. He was locked in the clubhouse with everyone because they had the gigantic manhunt just off the 11th fairway for Bucky Phillips, and he couldn't go home because there was like 300 policemen in the area blocking everything off. And yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But I gave the story to Bucky Phillips in there. I think most of it was truthful.
Who was, I'm misreading it, George the Animal Slupski?
Well, I
love the name.
Yeah, our skin game with South Hills, there was such dedicated golfers, or I call them golfers, that just needed a fix with this addiction to play golf. But when there was snow around here, we traveled to a Downing golf course in Harbor Creek, New York, which was along the Lake Erie Plain that didn't get the snows that we got that came up over the hills. And people from all over, 3 states would go to Downing because they knew it would be open. But when we got out there, we started hearing about this kid that lived along the first fairway or third fairway that was hitting golf balls just unbelievable lengths. And we'd heard that he works out all winter with a sledgehammer with a club at the end of it. And so we played our skin game, and Scott Smith and Greg Winter asked me if I wanted to play an emergency 9, which is going for another 9. And we were on the 10th tee, and this big guy walks up and says, do you mind if I play with you? And Scott Smith comes over to me and whispers and says, that's him, the legend. And I said, well, I got to see this. I mean, there's stories of him driving 400-yard par 4s or 450-yard par 4s. Well, he started playing with us, and for 3 holes, he was very unimpressive. He was missing shots. He was not hitting these 400-yard drives. But finally, we got to the 4th hole on the back 9, a par 5. And Scott Smith hit first, and he was a long ball hitter, and he bombed one down there, probably 280, 290, pretty good for the winter with the old equipment. And then Greg Winter got up, and he hit it by 20 yards. Well, this George Slupski is in the back of the tee, and he's watching this. And he goes over and takes his jacket off and sets it on his clubs, and I go, oh my God, this is like the playground fight that the big guy is taking his jacket off for the fight. Well, he goes over to the tee and he just creams one. It goes 50 yards past those other guys' drive, and he, suddenly goes back over to his bag and puts the jacket back on and walks down. But I thought that was just like the schoolyard fight.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I wrote a big chapter about him because I interviewed him and his brother about how he became such a long ball driver, and he was just phenomenal. He could never win the national championship though, because they have to put it on a grid of 40 yards wide, and something would always happen. He'd hit something on the grid and it'd bounce off, but he never won the regular long drive contest. He won the 45. The senior at 45 years several times, but his record is just unbelievable of reaching a par 5 and 2, standing on his knees, hitting 2 7-irons to reach a par 5 and 2, and just unbelievable.
at that time period, way back when, there was a guy on a PGA Tour named George Bayer.
Oh yeah.
Big guy, but of course, he didn't score very well, but he was a known commodity because he could hit so damn far.
He came to Moonbrook once, I think,
George Bayer.
in the exhibitions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was his big claim to fame. I'm just going to drop some names here of guys that, I mean, again, our lives have passed across, but like you talked about Danny O'Neill. How good was Danny O'Neill?
He was about the best ever around here. That was born here. You know, All-American at Penn State, and won all the, you know, the Buffalo District tournament at the age of, I think, 16. He won the Chautauqua County Amateur 3 times before he was probably 20. He tried out. He made it to the PGA Tour, played in the major championships, and didn't quite make it. But he went back to becoming like a club pro. I think he represented this company that had these walking carts, motorized carts. And he became part of the Western New York PGA again, and he won a few Western New York PGAs, but he wasn't into playing that much. But when he was 50, he decided to give the PGA Champions Tour a chance. And he shot an unbelievable score in the qualifier and made the PGA Champions Tour. The only one that ever, well, there might have been another guy that also qualified once. But he won a lot of money, and he was leading one of the tournaments with 1 round to go, and I think he finished 5th. But he won like $216,000 that year, and I guess he didn't qualify again the next year. But he was rubbing elbows with Gary Player and you know, all the rest of them, all the legends. And he told me in my interview that they gave him a lot of help and confidence. But I thought that was something for somebody that kind of gave up the game and then came back to make the Champions Tour and win money.
Where is Danny now?
He's in Florida.
Okay.
He's had, I think, a lot of knee surgeries, but he gave me a long interview, and his sister gave me a long interview.
Emily was unbelievable. I don't know how many times champion of Moonbrook, right?
38 times or something like that. And just like Northrop, there wasn't much of a career back then for women. There wasn't. She tried out, I think, for the St. Bonaventure men's team, and they wouldn't let her play. There's something to that effect. But she won a lot of local tournaments too, and was quite a player.
Bob Gunnell.
He's always considered Mr. Golf around here, that amateur that was, you know, really serious about golf and constantly played golf and was the skin game leader, and won the Buffalo District 2 times. And there was only 2 players from around here that I've heard that ever worn a mark in the middle of their irons that was the size of like a dime, because they hit the ball so consistently perfect. They wore a mark in the middle. Him and Bobby Steele from Fredonia, the one that got killed at Stanford, you know, real tragedy. But Bob, as a senior, won tournaments all over Florida and New York. New York State senior champion a couple times. Buffalo District senior champion, I think, 7 times. And everybody respected him as the best amateur around here, you know, below club pro, you know. And he was better than most of the club pros. But a real serious golfer. The last few years, I played a lot with him at Chautauqua, and he plays up the forward tees and goes to the fairways. But at 89 years old, he's breaking par. I mean, can you imagine? I don't know. I think that's hard to imagine, you know. But still serious and not going to give up, you know.
Well, he's remarkable. And for years, what I remember as a kid, he was a known golfer extraordinaire, but he was also a meter reader.
That's right.
For the city. So you'd see him come to the houses, read the meters, and you know he got done and played golf.
Yeah. I played with him so much I didn't put that story in the book.
Yeah.
But because I think that was the perfect job for a really good golfer. He's working his legs. He can, at that time, they get their route done, and they were done for the day.
Absolutely.
And even he's told me he went and practiced after that. And you can't blame a hard-working golfer. I've done some strange practices. I mean, I think I talk about the book of, I think I've trespassed on every city park and school in the area, and sometimes been kind of chased off. And
well, yeah, and then there was a father-son team of Toby and Denny Lyons. Did your paths cross with them?
Oh, the things I found out in this book about the history of golf around here were just unbelievable. I'd heard of Toby Lyons and Denny Lyons, but I didn't realize the records they held. Toby Lyons played on the PGA Tour for 5 years, and he finished third three times. At the time, he had the low record, 61 in a PGA tournament. It might be 61 or 62. But around here, he won everything with the pros. They're both in the Western New York PGA Hall of Fame. And his son Denny took right up where he left off. His son Denny won the Chautauqua County Amateur 4 times before he was 19 years old against the grown-ups. And he went on. He spent half the year in Florida. He won the Florida High School Championship. He was the top man at the University of Florida State. Was it Florida? Florida State team. He was All-American at Florida. He played with UB Green and some other people. He almost won the Porter Cup several times. One time he hit a ball out of bounds on the last hole to lose by a stroke. But I interviewed him. Toby Lyons, just remarkable. I mean, in elder years, he went to Florida in the winters and taught at, I think it was the Ben Sutton Golf Academy. And he taught Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, Evel Knievel, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, the whole works. But from my understanding, very unusual guy. Both of them very small, but could really play golf.
Now, where's Denny live?
South Florida.
Yeah,
he comes up here once a year. He's probably late 70s now. He meets up with the Bello family, but he was at Niagara Falls Country Club for quite a few years, which is a really nice country club. I played in a lot of tournaments with Roger Loop there for the pro amateur title that we almost won one year. When I had a 2 on a 440-yard par 4. It was a lucky shot, but it got a $1,200 skin.
Good for you. Good for you. Now you mentioned, and I've read a little bit about Bobby Steele.
Yeah.
And I knew his dad.
Yeah.
Tell me a little. You might as well for the camera a little bit about his story at Stanford and what happened.
Bobby Steele was, I've been told, would have been the best golfer that came out of here. Possibly not. Maybe Dan O'Neill or Dirk Ayers. But he gained great fame when he reached the finals of the USGA Junior Tournament, which is against everybody in the country that's 18 and under. And he got to the finals. I mean, there were people in this tournament like Curtis Strange and others that became...
It's match play.
It's match play. No one around here has ever gone that far in a USGA tournament, by far. And Stanford, I think, caught on to it and offered him a scholarship. And he went to Stanford and was a starter on the team as a freshman. I think an honorable mention All-American, low freshman on the team. And after the season in June finished, the school year, he was riding his bike down a steep hill near the Stanford campus, And at the bottom of the hill at a high rate of speed, in the middle of the night in darkness, he ran into another bicyclist and died a few hours later. What a tragedy.
Yeah.
That's who Steel Hall, Fredonia is named. There's many, the Canterbury School in Connecticut where he went to school has several buildings named for him. The Junior Masters at East Aurora Country Club has an award for him where that tournament, players from all over the world play in this they call it the Junior Masters. But a remarkable player. At 4 years at the Canterbury School, he was never beat. But it was Jack Schubert, the pro at Shorewood, where he played in Dunkirk, told me he's never seen a player practice so much. He'd get to the course at 7, 8 in the morning and play all day and all night the rest of the day. And he won the club championship there, I think, at the age of 14, and they changed the rules the next year. As far as the Steele family goes, the mother won the ladies club championship at Shorewood while she was 8 months pregnant. And the father was an avid golfer. I think he wasn't an accomplished golfer, but he was the president of the USGA senior division. And when he sold Red Wing, he started joining some of the best clubs in America. I mean, the golf club on Long Island and Shinnecock Hills and Seminole in Florida, and there was like 7 or 8 of them. And I think it was remarkable. And great family, yeah.
You've given me a manuscript of a book, and it's entitled, Hey, Boomer, Golf, Really? Why the title?
There's a saying going around that the millennials and the Gen X and all the other ones make fun of our generation. What do we call it?
Definitely
the boomer generation. And that they mock you by saying, hey, boomer, like they don't believe, what you're saying or what you did or anything like that. And I thought it was a good name for my story of golf, to live in that period and go through the 60 years of golf I went through. And it just one thought came into my head after another of memories, and just a great time to grow up, and what a country in a lot of ways.
As you're walking down memory lane or memory course, and you'd work on it, and what was the surprise to you, Scott? I mean, when you're bringing out all of these memories, and I just enjoyed reading about my memories.
I think interviewing people or reading about their golf story, the Lions, I didn't know they were that good. In Dirk Ayers' unbelievable career.
Dunkirk, right?
Dirk Ayers was from here. He won the New York State Amateur here at Moonbrook in 1995, but he turned pro and almost got on the PGA several times. But instead, he had to play on the Canadian Tour. He played on the Australian Tour. He told me that he was playing in the Australian Open, and he was 6 under for 8 holes. And he looked up at a leaderboard, and there was his name, then Greg Norman, and Peter Sr. So he, a little kid from Kennedy, that grew up at Randolph youth program. He's traveled the world for golf. He started a golf business of screen printing. He's caddied on the senior tour for his friend from Australia. I think his name is Mackenzie. But that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, a walk-on on the Penn State golf team.
Yeah.
Became the #1 player and won many tournaments at Penn State. And, just remarkable. There was other names that came up. I don't know if you've ever heard of Norman, the Canadian, the weird Canadian, Mo Norman, that every golfer thinks is like a cult thing. When pros when the PGA top pros would go to a tournament, they heard Mo Norman was out on the driving range, they'd all run to see him because he had the most unusual swing of all time. His feet were this far apart. The club went way out. He had a funny grip, but you could put a sign out at the 250 marker, and he could hit that sign like 10 times with a driver.
Wow.
But I guess he got hit by a car when he was young, and it did some damage. He was like autistic. He played on the PGA Tour for a while, but he kind of got driven off of it by the other pros because he slept in his car. He had soily clothes. He looked unkempt, and he never talked to anybody. He was so strange, and he walked so far ahead of everybody that he wouldn't talk to the other pros, but they kind of laughed him off the tour. But he won something like 100 Canadian golf tournaments and had like 50 course records in Canada. But was really kind of pathetic. Titleist bought, when they heard that he was in the senior years he was struggling, they gave him a stipend of every month, giving him $2,000 or something, and he lived in Florida till his death.
Wow.
But he played at Maplehurst Country Club in the Jenny Open.
No kidding.
And that was a funny tournament. This was 1962. The day before the tournament, George Knutson, the greatest Canadian player of all time,
Right.
maybe Mike, what's his name, were comparable, but he won like 10 times on the PGA Tour. He'd won the Rochester Open, and he was scheduled to play in the Jenny Open the next day, Monday, at Moonbrook. After 6 holes, he walked off the course. Some people said that he was too drunk because of winning the night before, and other people said he complained about the condition of the golf course. But anyway, the Post-Journal said he was booed heavily by people when he was leaving, and calling him all kinds of names for quitting and all that. But that's quite a story. Mo Norman finished. He shot a even par and won $50, which was a lot of money then.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was interviewed by the Post-Journal, and he said, "I have 2 Cadillacs, and I work at the biggest golf range in the world in Toronto." And that was about all you could get out of Mo Norman in an interview. Dirk Ayers told me a story about Mo Norman, that when he was on the Canadian Tour, he spotted him on the practice green hitting chips with one hand. And he went over and started talking to him. And he's asking him questions, and Mo Norman, from 50 feet, is chipping the ball in with one hand or just missing. So he was phenomenal. Denny Lyons is the only one that told me he was not impressed with Mo Norman, because he said he played in Ontario PGA events with him, and maybe he was having a bad day or something. But he's a legend of legends. There's so many legends around here,
So you have this manuscript, and hopefully, what's the next step, Scott?
Well, I never had it editorialized. My friend Linda Cowan, who worked for me when I had the basket company, does all kinds of things. She edited that Chautauqua book, and helped him. He'll help that guy with him. But I was going to have her change my English and all that. I was lucky that my wife showed me a Word app that I could get on my phone, because even though I owned a company for almost 20 years, I can't do this. And I wrote 2 copies handwritten that caused swelling in my wrist. And then near the end of the second one, she says, "Well, you can just put this Word thing on and you can dictate." The dictation was kind of hard because of names like Chautauqua. With that dictation thing cannot decipher Chautauqua. But most of it I just I edited by hand, but at least I could have it printed out, because I don't think any of you would have read my writing for the first ones. And Linda Cowan was so happy when she heard that I had the Word document. I think she can transfer that to her computer and edit it from there.
Any real surprises? Anything you said, wow, I definitely did not know that, or the world might find that of interest?
Oh, you know, the pandemic golf was interesting. You know, nobody knew what was going on with it, and I was playing at Chautauqua at that time, and it was an early spring, but the rules for the county and the state changed almost every day. You'd go to Chautauqua and there would be a barrier up one day. The next day the barrier would be down and you could walk the course. The next day you could get a cart, but only one in a cart. Then the next day you could get a cart, but you had to wash it yourself. And this went on for like 30 days. And people were surprised that, you know, the governments were pushing go out and hike, but you couldn't walk at a golf course 10 feet from somebody else, just like you were hiking, or even safer than hiking than that. But
I got to ask you, you have one very wonderful color photo here of Arnold Palmer ball and a dog.
Yeah, my first marriage, my wife bought a Pomeranian dog, and actually she worked at the bank and bought it in a drive-thru. And the dog slowly took to me, but she came up with a really good name for it, Arnie Palmer for Pomeranian.
Oh, wow.
And Arnie stayed with me, and when I started playing Chautauqua, I asked Stan Marshas, I says, can I bring the dog along at night when I'm playing alone? And he said, oh, sure. And everybody noticed the dog, and Carol Haas, who runs the snack bar, was told, all of her employees were told, you have a dish of ice cream for Arnie when he gets here. But other people would bring their dog and said, oh, that's a good idea, the dog would get exercise. And Stan Marshas would come out on his golf cart and say, you know the rules, you can't have a dog out here. And he'd be driving away, and I'm sure they were saying, what about Scott's dog? Well, Arnold had a lot of, he was like a member up there, and a lot of fun to play with. He had 9 lives. I got out of the car one time, and I heard a commotion over by the practice green, and I went over there, and Arnold's entire head was inside. Super Dave, who worked on the course, had his bulldog there. And Arnold's got to go make trouble everywhere he went. And the dog had Arnold's head inside of his mouth entirely, and he wouldn't let up. Finally, Dave got the dog to unclench it. And he was unconscious, and I picked up the dog and threw him in the car and headed for Rappol's office. And we're driving about few miles down the road, and I hear this barking in the back seat, and I look, and it's Arnold spotted some cows in the yard, and he was up and alive again. And Doc Rappel said, he just had a lot of shock. And
I would say so, yeah.
But I don't know if the people at Chautauqua are going to like this in this interview, but Arnold died in the middle of winter, and I didn't know what to do with him. He was such a close pet, almost like a son to me. And I took him up to Chautauqua, and in the middle of the woods between 9 and 7, I buried him there.
That's a great story.
But several years after that, 20 years after, no, maybe not, 10 years after that, between 10 and 15, I'm looking for balls over in that area where I buried him. And I look down, and I pick up an Arnold Palmer ball from decades old. And you just gotta believe.
Wow. And that's the ball.
Then that's the ball. You won't find that ball played in 50 years, you know.
Right, golly. Well, this whole, your road along golf and some of the stories is just meant to be, and I'm delighted you took the time to put it in writing.
Yeah, you retire, and one thing leads to another. You can't write a book about 3 or 4 or 5 stories. you know, I said it's going to be like an autobiography where I stop in the autobiography and tell the stories of the Lions and Dirk Ayers and on and on and on. There's so many prominent golfers, and
well, I don't think anybody's ever done anything like this, have they?
you read the chapter, you doesn't have to call me Johnson by Billy Sluga, the comedian.
Yeah, there's
that story at Maplehurst where the starter, back when Maplehurst was really packed with people, the starter goes, "Johnson on the tee." There were people getting stuck in the door coming out of the restaurant. There were people bumping into each other on the practice green. There was like 15 Johnsons showed up when he said that, and it was just hilarious. I mean, first name, an initial, next time.
Yeah, exactly.
What was my homeroom at Jamestown High School? There was 2 Johnson homerooms.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Well, Scott, what's the story I should have asked you that I haven't?
Oh, there's so many. There's stories about golf and work not mixing it well together. You know, playing in a January skin game out at Bemis Point, where a remarkable 45-degree day appeared, and there's 12 of us dividing teams up by the clubhouse in the middle of winter, and a guy comes by with a camera and a notepad and says, "Hey, I'm with the Post-Journal, and I'd like to do a story on you guys playing in the winter." Well, all of a sudden, 3 guys ran for their car. I think one guy jumped in the bushes. Another told him he's going to take that camera and do something with it. These are people that are supposed to be working. I worked on commission. I didn't have to worry, but
yeah, you were the basket company.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here's How before that.
Oh, that's right too.
Yeah. Yeah, my first interview at Here's How said, you know, we had a guy that played a lot of golf here before. We fired him. And I says, I understand. If you work on 100% commission, every week you know if you were working or not. You know?
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. Well, this has been so much fun.
Well, it's fun for me. You're very good at the interview. You know, you know, I don't know where you start with that book. You know?
Well, it's a fascinating vignette, and I personally, hopefully, as people listen to this, for me, because we are the same age, your paths cross with people. I mean, you mentioned names that I could never do what you did because I don't have that kind of memory. But
yeah.
Having read it, my mind's eye, I could see Allen Park clay courts.
Yeah.
I could see the municipal golf course. I could see the sliding down
Yeah.
the municipal, the tow rope coming up. All those things you mentioned, Maplehurst, the swimming pool, and Wally Holmes, and guys that, though I wasn't as involved with golf as you, my paths crossed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was great for me, and I thank you, man.
That was a great time. Lot of more kids. I mean, our class of 675 or something like that. I mean, a lot of kids around, but a lot of resources in Jamestown.
Yeah.
And just remembered a lot of my history, and from going to school at East Jamestown and living halfway in between East Jamestown and Ring School, and being transferred every year back and forth between Ring for 6 years. You know, that was how the school system worked. They couldn't build the schools fast enough for the baby boom.
Well, and you living on Stowe, you also, right down the road was
All-Star.
College Stadium and baseball and all of that world. So.
Yeah, 100-acre lot.
Yep, an 100-acre lot.
Yeah. Funny story in there that Dick Cole told me in his interview about he lived near the golf course, and he found a set of wooden shafted clubs in his garage, and he's like 8 years old, and he puts this together in his mind, the golf clubs, and there's a golf course down the street. So he went down there and he started playing. Well, somebody didn't tell him, though, you have to pay to play. And he was telling me every day a chase ensued. with all the workers down there, and the caretaker of the 100-acre lot, and Stan Lundeen was one of the chasers.
Okay.
You know, he was working a part-time job from college, and it was kind of funny. So he said sometimes they got his clubs, and his father had to go down and pick him up, or they chased him in the 100-acre lot. And, yeah, but those are funny times. There's a lot of golfers, a lot of PGA players. Not today's, but old days, you know, grew up on courses that they were just the caddies, and they had to break into courses and play at night and things like that. I remember a lot of stories by Chichi Rodriguez in Puerto Rico. You know, I think he said he never legally played a golf course until he was like 17.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you, Scott.